Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today we're talking must-drop players heading into week 2 of the fantasy football season. We talked yesterday about some great waiver wire targets, a really strong group of players. If you guys haven't had the chance to check out that video, please do check out the channel and go do so. But these are some players based on the players we talked about yesterday that you can go and proceed with dropping. I'll talk about a couple players at the end that if you're in like a 10-team league, not a 12-team typical league, that you can also consider dropping. But I'll talk about these players as guys that are hovering around that 50% mark, some even higher than that. A few of these guys will definitely be higher, that you should be dropping to add some of these high-profile guys like Puka Nacua, Kenneth Gainwell, Kyron Williams, and all the others we talked about. If you guys do enjoy this video, be sure to hit that like button. Would really appreciate if you hit the subscribe button as well, helping us out to reaching, we're almost at 31,000, I think, subscribers here on the channel. So would love if you guys hit that subscribe button. Let's get to our first player. It is from the Thursday night game. It's Sky Moore of the Kansas City Chiefs. Sky Moore's first week with an awesome opportunity with Travis Kelce missing time. Did not work out in any way, shape, or form. If you started him, it would have been a really, really tough way to start your first week of the fantasy season. He had 3 targets, didn't have a single reception, didn't record a single yard, but he finished third on the team in routes run as well, so that's also a problem behind MVS and behind Noah Gray. He split his routes out wide and in the slot, which I think was the expectation. You were going to move him around a little bit in this offense. But I mean, quite frankly, out-targeted by Jalen Watson, Isaiah Pacheco, Noah Gray, Rashee Rice, Kadarius Toney, who had a laughable game on Thursday night. I just think that this was the picture-perfect scenario for a guy heading into his sophomore season, and we just saw absolutely nothing to help make us think that this is going to change in any way, shape, or form heading into year 2. He wasn't on the field in year 1. This year he's on the field. He's not being targeted. I think Sky Moore will continue to be out there a ton, but when I'm seeing him out targeted by a guy like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I don't have much confidence that much is going to change here. And this offense does not need to have a productive wide receiver 2 to be a competent offense. So there's no guarantee that Kadarius Toney is going to be that wide receiver 1 for this team. We saw him out targeted by a number of players here. I like Kadarius Toney's talent more than him. It seems like MVS is never going to come off the field. That was the case for him last season. That continues to be the case here. Sky Moore, in my mind, is a safe drop because I cannot see myself trusting him when Travis Kelce is on the field to be productive, because this was a bit of a positive matchup. The Lions defense is nothing to be scared of, especially in the secondary. So Moore is a player that I'm safely looking to drop right now. Next up, this is a player that was probably on rosters in a lot of 12-team leagues, Marvin Mims of the Denver Broncos. He was 8th on the team in routes run in week 1. That is not going to cut it for this offense. He just ran 10 total routes. Jerry Jeudy will have that impending return, and I expect him to be back in the next couple of weeks. Potentially, it could be next week. There was talk about whether or not he would play in week 1. We have a new-look offense as well that I think is going to be very difficult for a wide receiver 3 likely on this team to be at all fantasy relevant. This offense under Joe Lombardi and Sean Payton, they averaged up the target of just 5 yards in week 1. That's not going to create many explosive plays from Marvin Mims, which he will need as the wide receiver 3 in this offense. The way that he would survive in fantasy is by generating explosive plays. That won't happen in this Joe Lombardi offense. So at best, he's the 3rd, probably 4th option behind maybe Greg Dulcich as well, in a below average offense that also targets its running backs a ton. There's just no second thought in my mind. You can certainly drop Marvin Mims. Closing things out with our wide receivers, we got 3 wide receivers and 3 running backs to talk about. Allen Lazard, brutal thing to see in the Monday Nighter with Aaron Rodgers likely being out for the season. It hasn't officially come out, but all the videos, all the things I've seen on Twitter, it seems like a foregone conclusion. And so long as Zach Wilson is operating this offense, there is absolutely no one of value beyond Garrett Wilson, and Garrett Wilson takes a major hit to his fantasy value too. If you can find anybody that still thinks Garrett Wilson can be the same player that he would have been with Aaron Rodgers, I would definitely find a trade partner if you do have him. But as far as things go for Allen Lazard, he's not an overwhelming talent, and really anyone that drafted him, I know I didn't, is basically just drafting him because they went off of that rapport and relationship that he has with Aaron Rodgers, and hey, maybe he could be a red zone target for Rodgers. It's not going to be the case with Wilson. Yes, Lazard was on the field. Yes, Lazard managed like 4 targets, 2 receptions, and like 40, 50 yards. It doesn't really mean that you're going to be able to rely on him to week to week. This team last season was the 29th ranked scoring offense, 17.4 points per game. I think Wilson's going to be the guy the rest of the season. That is what Robert Saleh said. So I would expect that to be the case. And if that is the case, the ground game with Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook will be on the forefront for this offense. So stay away from Allen Lazard. Definitely drop him. Okay, moving to our running backs. The first one, and the one I think will be maybe a bit of disagreement amongst people in the comment section, will be Devonta Chain. So A-Chain was listed as a healthy scratch, a healthy inactive for this team to start the season. We saw as well Salvon Ahmed being the number 2 in this offense, Raheem Mostert assuredly being that number 1 option. And for what I talked about with A-Chain heading into the season is he's not going to be a between the tackles runner. He's certainly not going to get the scoring opportunities inside the 5 and those easy touchdowns that we saw Raheem Mostert receive in week 1. And if he's going to have a receiving role, he's going to be competing with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill to be able to earn targets and earn enough to be valuable in fantasy. That's something I'm not looking to rely on. This Miami Dolphins offensive line is still fairly underwhelming, so we're basically going off of rushing volume and touchdowns. And Raheem Mostert has that job, and he will continue to have that job throughout the season so long as he's healthy. Devonta Chain is an add if Raheem Mostert gets hurt, and even then, he might not be the number 1 running back for this team. In that case, they could also look to free agency to be able to do so too. So, I mean, there just isn't a lot of excitement for me for Devonta Chain. There wasn't going into the season, and now there can't be for really anybody as a inactive to start the season. Another running back here. Again, there are a lot of exciting options on the waiver wire. So for me, Dion Jackson is a player that I just cannot get excited about in any way, shape, or form. Even with a matchup with the Texans coming this week, I have no qualms about sending this guy to the waiver wire and completely dropping him. Hilarious stat line in week 1, 13 carries, 14 yards. That's not going to cut it. I hope none of you guys were starting him. He did receive 6 targets, 5 receptions for just 14 yards. So, in a full PPR league, maybe he didn't completely lose you your week. But Zach Moss has that impending return that I do think he will take over as the number 1 option in this offense until Jonathan Taylor potentially comes back. So you got a mobile quarterback in Anthony Richardson as well, stealing touchdown opportunities. I just don't see any way that Dion Jackson is a player that you can confidently put into your lineup, even in the most plus of matchups that could potentially be the Houston Texans based on what last season was. Easy drop for me. I know a lot of you guys took him with your last pick. I'm definitely loving some of the waiver wire options over Dion Jackson this week. Last player, one that I was pretty excited about in the early parts of the preseason and definitely noticed things starting to fizzle out as we got closer to the actual season. Rashad Penny of the Philadelphia Eagles. He was as well, just like Devonta Chain, a healthy inactive to start week 1. I'm surprised that Penny can't carve out a role as the touchdown guy, as the inside the 5 guy, as the bruiser for this offense. But look, Kenny Gainwell is a guy that's been with this organization for multiple seasons. He was with Nick Sirianni last year. So the RB1 role is given to a guy that has history with the organization, and that's a problem for Rashad Penny being able to carve out a role if he ever gets on the field. And again, he's being sat over a guy like Boston Scott, which I thought was surprising, but it is what it is. And it's really hard to see him getting in over Scott at this point because much like Gainwell, Scott has a history with this organization. They know what to expect from him. He has a role. So Penny's in a spot here where it's going to be really tough to get on the field. And in a best case scenario, he's in a TD dependent role, which is good. Like in this offense, I want to have the touchdown score because we saw with Miles Sanders, that can be valuable. But he's still, if Kenneth Gainwell is healthy, and he isn't an inactive, he's going to probably share that role with Gainwell as it is. So there's really not a lot of ways that I can project Rashad Penny being valuable to your team on the bench. The only way it is if Kenneth Gainwell gets hurt and then he gets on the field, and then even then he still has to earn the opportunity to be that valuable piece to score touchdowns and provide value in fantasy. So pretty safe drop for Penny, but definitely a guy that's pretty highly rostered too. Before we close things out, a couple guys like I mentioned for 10-team leagues that you could look to drop. Treylon Burks, not someone I was excited about drafting, but this Tennessee Titans offense looked really underwhelming, and Burks was out there a ton, but he isn't getting a lot of targets. DeAndre Hopkins looks like that target hog again in this offense. And then we also have Juju Smith-Schuster, who's coming off the field for guys like Demario Douglas and Kayshon Boutte. I don't think Juju's a really overwhelming talent. He's not getting on the field enough. I know they spent some money to add him or to sign him during free agency, but he's just not a player that provides all that much excitement. I'd rather have a Kendrick Bourne or a Hunter Henry instead of having Juju Smith-Schuster. Again, this is a 10-team league thing. In other leagues, I could see you wanting to hang on to these guys. Those are all of the potential drops for you this week. If there's any other players you're looking to drop to add some of the guys we talked about on the wire, definitely drop that down below in the comments. Happy to help out as much as I can. Thank you guys so much for watching. Would really appreciate it if you hit that like button if you did enjoy, and hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you on the next one.